Well, kicking things off, Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders are the big winners of yesterday's Wisconsin primary. But what exactly does it mean for their opponents? Are they beginning to feel the pressure? Well, the campaign trail is the campaign trail is far from over. And discussing this now and much more, our political commentators, J.C. Polanco, Michael Benjamin, and Mariah Starr. Got a full cast here.
Got the full boat.
Got the dream team.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's talk about yesterday. Some people surprised, some not surprised. Bernie Sanders and then Ted Cruz coming out victorious. For Ted Cruz, an opportunity to close the gap. And I'll start with you, Michael. An opportunity to close the gap and a little bit closer to a contested convention?
I think that's what's going to happen. And as they get closer to the upcoming primaries, they're going to deny Trump the ability to have the 1,237 delegates that he needs to clinch a nomination. So it'll be a contested ballot at the convention. It makes it sort of an exciting convention for Republicans and for audiences all over America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Senator Cruz is in a very good position right now to guarantee exactly what Michael was saying. A lot of us in the Never Trump movement want to make sure that the 1,237 delegates for Donald Trump does not happen. And the only way to do that is with Senator Ted Cruz. He's the only one that's proven that can beat Ted Cruz. Currently, we have a problem. His name, Governor John Kasich from Ohio. The man still remains in the race today, has less votes than Marco Rubio to this day, has less delegates than Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio dropped out a month ago. This man remains in the race, and he's taking votes away from Senator Ted Cruz, who is clearly the anti-Trump candidate. So it gets very concerning for a guy like me who doesn't want Trump to be the leader of our party.
Agree, disagree. Those Kasich voters, if they're out of there, they're going all the way for Ted Cruz.
Disagree. Kasich is the most viable general election candidate for the Republican Party. They all know that. And one of the challenges here is that with the Trump campaign and the Cruz campaign battling it out, once you get past the first ballot, it's anyone's game. So Kasich knows that they can easily go to him if he survives that first ballot attempt.
Well, the reason why that's not true is that the 3rd Congressional District in Wisconsin yesterday proved to be the actual point that Senator Ted Cruz is making. In Wisconsin, it turned out that the 3rd Congressional District was polling with Governor Kasich doing very well until the governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, came out and said, let's go with Cruz. He's the only one that can stop Donald Trump. And that entire congressional district flipped and went with Ted Cruz at the last minute. So the reality is that there's no one voting for John Kasich that's going to go ahead and vote for Donald Trump.
All right, let me move on to the other side of the aisle real quick and talk about big win for Bernie Sanders, winning 7 out of the last 8 states. Michael, for Bernie Sanders supporters, they're gung-ho. But then on the other side, you got people saying not so fast.
Of course. I mean, Hillary's come to New York. She should win New York. She should win California. She doesn't have quite the momentum, but she does have the name recognition, and she'll probably still wind up being the nominee. But I think it's important for Bernie Sanders to be in this race, to get his ideas and agenda on the Democratic platform. That's important. And eventually you'll see both parties coming together for a unified effort to win in November. I think the Democrats have the winning platform, the winning agenda.
That's hilarious. To think that all of a sudden all the people supporting Bernie Sanders are going to come over and support someone that they don't even trust, they think is a liar, is under FBI investigation. And by the way, Michael never wants to, by the way, viewers, I'm outnumbered 3-1 here in case you're wondering.
2-1.
2-1 and you're quick to do a tag team. You know this, Darren. But this is the reality. The reality is of 142 FBI agents focusing on this case. The worst thing that can happen is an indictment down the road. And people know this. Now, if she's going to get, and it may happen, if she gets indicted, we're going to have a big issue, because what do you do when you hand over the nomination to a lady who keeps losing 8 out of the last 9 contests Bernie has won? And right now she still has more delegates. There's a fix in the Democratic Party to deliver the nomination to Hillary. Perhaps it is because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, and maybe that's why you've designed it to make it so
Bernie
that
Sanders
there's a coronation. He's not a
it.
Democrat. He's a socialist trying to get the Democratic nomination.
He's
But technically he's not a Democrat. So maybe perhaps, and I think it'd be great if you can be honest and say, yes, the fix is in, JC. We designed it to protect ourselves against independent candidates like Bernie Sanders. I'd give you more credit for saying it.
I had no say.
Well, remember, the Democratic Party depends on superdelegates. After losing in 72, 84, and 88, they designed superdelegates to protect the Democratic Party from people like Sanders. So this is a structural feature that the Democratic Party benefits from to help them win the South. Now, the challenge here is that Sanders supporters don't like Clinton because they believe she's a liar, they believe she's a typical politician, part of the establishment, so they are really not going to support Clinton. They're completely fine with going for Trump even over Clinton. And so we are going to see a divided Democratic Party if Clinton wins the nomination.
Let's talk about New York. They both have agreed to debate here in New York, and that debate has been set to be on New York One as well as CNN. And the question, I guess, is if you're debating here in New York, some people say for Hillary Clinton, there's some work that still needs to be done. Michael says that, it's pretty much a done deal. You think that Clinton will win New York, but there's a lot of people saying, hey, not so fast.
Hey, wait a minute. You got to remember, hey, Bernie Sanders came to the South Bronx just last week. Over 18,000 people, young, old, black, white, Hispanic, all showed up. And I saw how many people were there. That's an incredible thing to see in the Bronx and in New York for a guy who's not even a Democrat running in the Democratic primary. So I think he's making a dent. He wants to make a splash. He needs to win New York in order to win the nomination.
But he won't win New York.
Well, he wants to win.
New York.
He's working towards it. And who knows what can happen on April 19th.
But in response to what Mariah said, the Bernie Sanders supporters that I know are repulsed by Donald Trump. And I don't see any of them voting for Trump were he the nominee. I don't see them even voting for John Kasich come November. The Democratic Party, these young people will eventually call us to the party because the platform will reflect their interest. And then they'll vote for the Democrat in November.
Well, true, they aren't voting for Trump, but they are willing to let a Trump presidency take place because they so dislike Clinton.
And they'll stay home.
I haven't seen evidence of that.
Oh, they have been talking about it avidly. I mean, Bernie supporters, Bernie grassroots activists have been very adamant that a Clinton nomination will make them stay home.
It's that kind of thinking that led, the third-party candidacy of Ralph Nader to ruin the 2000 election and throw the presidency to George Bush, who in his term cost American lives in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, don't start doing that.
They should recognize.
It was Bill Clinton's impeachment, Michael. It was Bill Clinton's impeachment that cost Al Gore the election.
Let me finish my point. If they do not coalesce with the Democratic nominee to defeat the Republican in November, we're going to have a repeat of the 2001 to 2008.
We are likely going to have a four-candidate race where it will likely be thrown to the House if no candidate gets the required 270 electoral
And
votes.
everybody knows there'd be a Republican
It goes to
victory.
Republicans.
Yes.
We don't want that. That's insane.
But that is- that's
and
most likely
JC
the
says,
scenario.
I have
everybody
no
knows
problem
what
with
to
it coming to the House.
Let me move on and talk a
I'll
little
talk
bit
about
more.
one last thing about that scenario. It's you can game it out, but the reason why it won't happen, it's unlikely an independent candidate is ever going to win a state enough votes to win a state's electoral votes to throw the election into
And a
the House.
four-candidate
Let me,
race that
let, me,
can
let
happen.
me bring it closer to home for a second. I got to bring it closer to home, guys. I want to talk about New York State for a second. We've got the governor, Governor Cuomo, signing into legislation the $15 minimum wage. I want to get your take on it because there's some people who say, listen, governor is really just pro-city and anti-state. Thoughts?
It was a huge mistake. The last 10 years, we've had over 2 million New Yorkers leave to the Carolinas and to Florida seeking jobs. New York is suffering. The Bronx, well, thanks to Ruben Diaz Jr., we've turned things around somewhat. But unemployment among young people here in the Bronx is high. I think raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour does not incentivize the risk-taking entrepreneur from opening up a business. It ignores the fact that automation is going to be all over New York City. At BMCC, where I teach, that McDonald's no longer has employees. It only has automated cash registers with one server and two cooks in the back. This was a place that employed dozens of young people that would take my classes. We're going to continue seeing that in our supermarkets and every low-skilled labor force. A job that we see across the Bronx is going to start getting replaced by machines. This was a major mistake.
That statement fails macroeconomics 101. When you invest in workers at the bottom level, that provides an economic support and that then empowers entrepreneurs to build businesses here. So they're leaving from New York because we haven't had this legislation. Now they'll be coming back because we'll have the protection for workers here.
That's just not true. You can see that there's no longer those jobs that people used to have is now filled by computers. Employers are no longer going to be willing to take the risk where now they have to spend $15 an hour. It's going to cost people more money to buy products. And there's going to be less hours available for employees. And if not only does it fails your version of Macro 101, but it passes a lot of Macro 101, including Professor Thomas Sowell.
But we haven't seen what's going to happen yet. But I think the reason people have left New York is for a better quality of life and for the dollar to stretch further. Because of the low wages in New York, people cannot afford to live in our town because of the basis of rent, paying for your food, and everything necessities in life. So they move elsewhere for a better quality of life. Raising minimum wage should help in some way. And we're also looking at the fact that minimum wage jobs have become the predominant means of employment not for young people, but for older people who have families to raise, and that's, I think, the impetus behind it. We also forget it's being phased in over a couple of years in New York, and then to the rest of the state by 2020. And then it's going to happen across in California and probably across the United States over the next 6 years. And it's quite possible the $15 as a minimum wage will probably not even be sufficient by the time we reach the year 2020.
We need to focus on raising the skills that these people have instead of raising the minimum wage. It is absolutely ridiculous that a soldier in the U.S. Army today gets paid $18.15 an hour, and if you work at a McDonald's, now you're getting pushed $15 an hour, almost double what a soldier makes, and then you run the risk of having that owner of that franchise in the McDonald's fire you and put a machine instead. Not only fire you, but fire another dozen employees and replace you with a machine that's not going to request more money, doesn't get sick, and doesn't request family paid leave.
Then maybe your Republican Congress should pay servicemen and women what they should earn instead of wasting money on weapon systems that are meant to replace them.
Who understands you? You first want to talk about cutting defense, and then you want to talk about increasing defense. It depends on what Wednesday we're here with Darren.
This is a big structural problem that's affecting the entire country. You have a fundamental lack of education of the workers. You have jobs going to China, India. You have a lack of protection of companies here from globalization. That's where you need to start. The minimum wage is a good start, but needs to be nationwide.
But Michael, but let's say, hold up, Darren.
You're going to get the last word, Jason.
Michael was just talking about how you can't afford things, right? Well, raising the minimum wage makes it a lot more difficult for people to be able to afford things because employers are going to have to charge more money for that product to make the ends meet for the $15 an hour.
That's not true.
It's absolutely true.
Gentlemen, I'll see you next week. We can pick this up next week. Thank you very much. Mariah, JC.
I teach economics, not this guy's economics.
We need security and a referee. Got to be back. Listen. Stay tuned because we got more news coming up. But we want to say before we go to break, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, in partnership with the borough president and State Senator Mark Jonag, Council Member Jimmy Vaca, held a Bronx Town Hall meeting to hear exactly what Bronxites had to say about improving our city. Our Bronx Tech correspondent, Nancy Asiama, has more on the story.